welcome to the show. I am Mark Zubarek, and I am happy to inform you that today I have been asked to do a recording of a special meeting that was held in Newburyport, and it is conducted by the Citizens for Responsible Education, and it is a local grassroots coalition of taxpayers in Newburyport, Salisbury, Amesbury, Newbury, West Newbury, Merrimack, Georgetown, and other surrounding towns in Massachusetts. They are advocating for the schools to teach our kids how to think and not what to think, and for parents to maintain the right to make decisions regarding our citizens' health and well-being. We're working to remove costly social engineering programs from the curriculum that only serve to divide students along racial and gender lines. We look to restore the healthy, non-political educational system that allows kids to thrive socially and academically. This organization has sponsored this particular education forum, which I was glad to go and record for them. And I am also using this as a doorway into what's going on in the Danvers school system as well. So just what is social emotional learning? What really is being taught in our schools with regards to the buzzwords social emotional learning, critical race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion, gender identity ideology, and culturally responsive teaching. These are buzzwords that we hear at every school committee meeting, whether it's in Newburyport, whether it's in Danvers, whether it's in other communities. What comprehensive sex education, CSE, is and what the impact will be on sex educational already being taught in public schools throughout the state of Massachusetts. If the House of Representatives passes the Healthy Youth Act, Massachusetts Senate Bill 2459. These are results of our communities and our representatives to the state legislature of what kind of things are they introducing onto our children, because every time you speak in front of the school committee, the answer is it's been dictated by the Massachusetts State Board of Education. So we need to explore that. Why our kids are given all these surveys in school and what they are really about, what the difference is between active and passive parental consent, how you as a parent and as a student can opt out of your child from being administered these surveys and from participating in sexual education. What rights you have as a parent, what the protection of pupil rights law is, and how to know if your school is violating these rights. How to write a Freedom of Information request, and I have written a few of those. To obtain public records about topics that are being taught in public, in the thought at our questions, what your school officials do not answer. What actions you can take to have a voice in your community to engage other parents and citizens. So The Citizens for Responsible Education has put this forum together for us, and I was very glad to go and record it for our community. However, when I got to the meeting, which was held at the Elks Club in Newburyport, and it was an educational forum on social emotional learning. What are the buzzwords? We already went through that. What I wanted to do is introduce our speakers, but before I got to the speakers, my reporting or journalistic urge asked me to go and visit the demonstrators that were outside. And I held a few interviews with the parents that were objecting to this forum, and now these parents really are on the same plane, but they're objecting to each other. So now we'll show you a brief introduction of what the parents that were across the street from the Elks Club, and they were demonstrating support for their education system. Can you tell me why you're holding the sign today?
We support our schools, our local schools. We support our local schools and their curriculum and our administrators and our teachers, and we're here to just show that support.
Our superintendent, and however he wants to allocate funds, he should, can. Yeah. It's because not that I don't support.
They moved him out of the zoo and into the bathroom.
I think we all feel that. Jesus.
Can you tell me what are you demonstrating right here?
And they'd get some ideas from you.
Just for the camera.
Who's,
I can hear.
I know, but I don't know who I'm talking to.
I'm a news reporter for Topics of the Town.
From where?
Danvers.
Okay. Well, we're here supporting our schools and our teachers, and just letting people know that we don't want hate groups in Newburyport.
You know what?
We don't want hate groups in Newburyport. So we're here supporting our teachers and our schools and our community.
And these are mostly parents?
Yeah, parents, concerned members of the community across, I don't know that they're all parents. I think it's a little bit of everybody.
Thank you. Can you tell me a little bit about what are you out here for today?
Yeah, definitely. Why don't you find somebody who's more?
Yeah, this man wants to know why
Yeah,
we're here.
we
Support our schools. We're here because there was a forum with what seems to be some really strange misinformation about what is taught and what is valued, with outsiders from Tennessee who specialize in basically vilifying social emotional learning as sort of a scapegoat for all kinds of problems in our schools, and it's just not true. And so there are teachers out here, there are parents out here, there are grandparents out here, and it's just, if you look at this as a fact sheet on what social emotional learning is and isn't, it's very, I mean, this is, as we were just saying, this is not, you know, dramatic new stuff. This was what we learned as civics or citizenship or being a good neighbor back in my school days, their school days. So
I know,
it's an attempt to just put some facts back into the conversation, and also to stand in support with our administration and our teachers and our librarians, who are getting often sort of browbeaten for doing the right thing, which is teaching kids, which is what we want them to do.
Have there been any incidents or anything in regard to
Incidents? I don't know what. No, I don't think so. I mean, social emotional learning is not a. It's not a fraught subject. It shouldn't. Let me rephrase. It should not be a fraught subject. I can't think of any incident related to social emotional learning that is of concern.
For the extreme right wing.
Hang on. Let me get to you.
for the extreme right wing is part of what they call woke,
Right.
culture wars. Anything they can pull out of context and throw at that, they're very happy to do it. And unfortunately, SEL is one of those things. They don't understand what it involves, why it's in the classroom. They just pull. It's the same thing with critical race theory. Same kind of culture war wokeness that they use to smear these methodologies, which are very valuable to students at all levels.
What do you see as the value of SEL?
To me, the value of SEL is teaching students that it's okay to be frank about your emotions, to speak honestly about how you feel about certain things, and to be sensitive to the emotions of others in the classroom, no matter what their race, no matter what their gender. To me, that's one of the most important things that's involved. I'm not a teacher, I don't teach it, but
you have been a parent or a grandparent.
some time ago, yes. Right now I'm a grandparent. Right.
There seems to be a lot of discussion about it, and I'm wondering, how has this come about in the report?
You have to ask someone else. I have no idea how this whole thing has come about, other than that outsiders with an agenda, this is happening across the country, by the way, are going into communities and stirring up with misinformation this kind of
same way that progressives
commotion.
can organize through.
I've been told that this is all being pushed by
Whatever,
the
there have been national groups
Massachusetts
like
Board
Moms
of
for Liberty
Education.
and
When you
things
say
like that
this
that
all
are
is being
really
pushed,
pushing,
The SEL curriculum
I don't want to use the word
I wouldn't use the word pushed. I would say that,
presented.
and
Yeah.
they are
it's a legitimate tradition within the teaching community.
Does your school committee back all
Yeah.
of this?
I have no idea. I'm not on the school committee. I'm not going to speak for them. Sure.
And
Briefly introduce our speakers, because we have two on the agenda, and we are going to show you a first segment, which is a speaker biography of Jennifer McWilliams, who was teaching in 2020 when her administration fired her for exposing the social emotional learning program at her school. She currently has a First Amendment federal lawsuit to defend her right for free speech. And you've heard me speak about First Amendment rights. She is a consultant for parental rights groups, government officials, and law firms across our country. She is a member of AEI's Conservative Education Reform Network and has written for the American Mind and Center for Renewing American. Most recently, she, as Jennifer, helped with the landmark lawsuit in Tennessee that argues SEL is in violation of the state's critical race theory ban. So we will have a lengthy explanation of Jennifer's position, and she is an expert at this because she has gone through many variations in different capacities. So now that we have Jennifer, please take over the presentation, and she will be on for a few minutes.
Jennifer McWilliams, who is the country's leading expert on how social emotional learning programs have infiltrated every school district in America. In September of 2019, she started to inform parents and citizens about the concerning changes in the education system. In February of 2020, Jennifer was fired for exposing the social emotional learning program at her school. She now has an ongoing federal First Amendment case to defend her right to free speech. Today, Jennifer travels across America educating and consulting organizations, law firms, parental groups, and elected officials on how to fight this radical program. She is the author of she is an author at The American Mind and a consultant for Center for Renewing America. Jennifer is a member of the Teacher Ambassadors for Kids and Country. Please help me with a very warm welcome for our first speaker, Mrs. Jennifer McWilliams.
Thank you so much for having me. I understand that this is a concerning and heated topic, but I am thankful for the ability to give voice to this, my opinion, and everyone's opinion, including ones that may not align with mine. So I do want to say, though, nobody is afraid. Nobody is afraid of the other side, the other story. What we are doing is we are standing to fight for our children and our right to voice our children. It's not about being afraid. It's about you're the parent and you need to raise your child. That's what it's about. Okay, so I'm going to give you an overview of what's happening in the education system, and clearly many of you realize there's something going on. That's why you're here, right? That's why they are having this. That's why you brought me to this beautiful town, by the way. I've never been here, and what an amazing little town that you need to preserve, clearly. It's beautiful. So what I'm going to do is tell you why this is happening, why every day you get on social media, you get on to see what's going on in the news, you hear people talking. Why is it that everyone is saying what's going on with our education system? I'm going to explain to you what has happened to the education system in the last few years. And the problem that has happened is called social emotional learning. Okay? And social emotional learning sounds nice. Everybody wants their children to learn socially and emotionally how to manage their lives and be successful in the world. But the problem is with social emotional learning, they took those terms and they redefined them in a way that often does not align with what people want their children to learn and value. And that is why I say we're fighting for our right to teach our own children and not a government institution. They don't have the right to do that. So I'm going to explain how this works. Social emotional learning is the complete transformation of our education system to psychologically manipulate this generation of children to believe critical race theory as objective truth. SEL is a thought reform program that undermines parents and replaces them with the government, and that is the problem that we have. Okay? Critical race theory, if you want to teach your own children that theory as an objective truth, that is your right to do as a parent. But our government should not be teaching that. Essentially, our government is using this as a thought reform program to literally dismantle the country that we value and the rights that we have. And I will show you how. Very quickly, I do not go into critical race theory a lot, and I'm sure a lot of you already understand this, but I'm going to give you an extremely brief explanation of it because you cannot understand critical race theory if you do not understand social emotional learning. So, critical race theory is the idea that our country was founded on racism and oppression from the beginning. The reason that we have everything, every system that we have, every institution, everything that we have, our Constitution included, was set up only to uphold white supremacy. That's the foundation of critical race theory. And within critical race theory, within the kindergarten through 12th explain this. So there are categories, you can pull this up online, and there are wheels that are very intricate. You can really divide people up as many times as you want, but this is a basic one just so that you can understand. If you're a critical race theorist, you believe that every person falls in a category of each of these, or falls somewhere in a category of each of these. Race, gender, sexual orientation, documented, undocumented, religion, ability status, socioeconomic status, country of origin, age, education, language, geographic location. And depending on where you lie within each of those categories, a critical race theorist believes that you fall somewhere on a hierarchy of privileged and oppressed in our country. It doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter your values, what you do for society, how you treat people, none of those things matter. What matters to someone that believes in critical race theory is these categories. And again, depending on where you fall within each of these categories, you fall somewhere on a hierarchy in our country of oppressed and privileged. And so the things that are coming out of the education system right now are based on those two ideas, the categories and where you fall, and the idea that our country is founded on racism and oppression. And that when you hear them tell you we need to dismantle inequitable systems, it's important to realize a critical race theorist believes the foundation of our country is inequitable, therefore they have to take down every system in our country. What they're talking about, what they're teaching the children, is to dismantle America.
And then what?
The social emotional learning, I will explain how it works in the education system, but to me this actually says, to some people, I can probably just shut this down at this point after this slide. Social emotional learning supporters. There are many of them, but I'm going to name some of the big ones. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, Southern Poverty Law Center, United Nations, National Equity Project, World Economic Forum, Planned Parenthood, and the National Education Association, the Teachers Union. The one here in the corner that I skipped is called the Fetzer Institute, and that might be the one that you have not heard of. I will give you just a very brief explanation of the Fetzer Institute. The Fetzer Institute was founded by a man by the name of John Fetzer. And he was a very successful man. He was big in radio. He owned the Detroit Tigers. He was very, very wealthy. But a lot of people didn't know that his passion in life was to spread his spirituality. He was a devout follower of a woman by the name of Alice Bailey. Alice Bailey is known as the mother of the New Age spiritual occult movement, and she believed in a one world, global spiritual movement. Nothing I'm saying to you is, this is all, you can look it all up, it's all fact, and I have more information on my website just to give you some context. But John believed heavily in Alice Bailey and her spirituality and experimentation with occult practices. So what he did was he took his wealth and he founded the Fetzer Institute. And the Fetzer Institute is in Michigan, and the entire purpose of the Institute, the mission and vision of that institute, is to spread a one world global spiritual movement. In 1994, they brought education leaders, specific education leaders that they knew would help push this, to the Fetzer Institute. And they had a meeting, and at that meeting, that is where they coined the term social emotional learning, and they founded the housing unit that I'll talk about more in a minute, but called CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. emotional learning and housing unit that really controls all the strings in Castle were founded at the Fetzer Institute. The Fetzer Institute, in their theory of change, their documentation for what they're trying to accomplish, says in their theory of change that they needed, in order to carry out this mission, they needed an entry point into the education system that was innocuous, and once they were able to get that entry point, they would start spreading this new spirituality. That entry point was social emotional learning. Now, if I come across anybody that wants to practice that in their own home, I believe in America. You go right ahead. But our government is violating our Constitution, undermining parents, and seriously harming our children by supporting this. And it's not okay. And again, you can get more information on that on my website, but I think that's a really good point to give people, because nobody's crazy. This is an entire agenda that has been pushed into the education system, and I can prove it. So, social emotional learning programs. One of the things that is extremely confusing for people is that there are over 100 social emotional learning programs in our country that schools use. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I took a job in 2019, very small school in Indiana, and when I realized what was happening, I spoke out against it in my own time, but I opposed it. I said, what are we doing? We don't have the right to teach children morals, values, attitudes, beliefs. That is a parent's job. Again, whether or not the parent agrees with the way I do it or not, I'm talking about American. And so I spoke out against it, and they fired me for it in 2020. When I started to get attention for it, and I was trying to speak out and say, well, I was speaking out against social emotional learning, I found very quickly that people had no idea what I was talking about. First of all, they didn't know what social emotional learning was. And then secondly, even when I explained it to people, they believed it wasn't happening in their school district, and the reason is because they have 100 programs, and it's all on purpose to deceive you so that it's very difficult to track. Some of the school that I was fired from used a program called Believer in Me. There is, these are only a few, but Conscious Discipline. Second Step is a massive one. It's in every state. Mind Up, Pathways. There's a Michigan Model for Health, Tools of the Mind. But again, there are over 100 of them. So if your school, these don't ring a bell, just ask them if they're using social emotional learning, because here is what is important. It's not the name of these programs. What's important is that they all follow the same framework. And that framework comes from CASEL, the organization that was founded at the Fetzer Institute. If you dig into your state education department in social emotional learning, at somewhere you will find CASEL referenced, and you will find this framework. If your school has a SEL program, and it wasn't listed in the very few that I had listed, it doesn't matter. Look into that website, do a little digging, a little bit of clicking, and you'll find this. This is where the focus needs to be. But they use all of those programs in the deception of language to deceive people. So don't be deceived by it. This is the problem, and it looks very nice, right? So I'm going to explain this to you. This is the framework that social emotional learning operates on in your school. What they said was that back in '94, they said, parents are very busy, so they don't have time to teach their children the basic life skills that they need to be successful in life. So we need to do it for them. So we're going to teach the children self-awareness, self self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. Those are the 5 competencies that they say they are going to teach your children with social and emotional learning. Now, do you want your children to have those skills in life? Of course. Of course you do. But by whose standards are they being delivered through the school? Not mine. These competencies are being delivered to your children through what they call an equity lens. When you hear equity lens, that means through the viewpoint of someone that believes in the critical race theory viewpoint, that believes that our country is systemically racist and oppressive. And when you deliver anything through an equity lens, the purpose of that is to get whoever you're delivering it to, and in this case it's your children, to understand that theory as truth. So when they talk about teaching these skills to your children, it is not in the way that many Americans would teach their children, but they sound nice. They purposely use language like this, very innocuous, it's very deceptive, and they do it because look where we're at right now. If they came out 8 years ago, and instead of these competencies, they said, we're going to teach your children the life skills they need. White supremacy, whatever, name any of it, right? Racism, oppression, vote for reparations. They would have never got this far. But they're teaching them through that lens because it sounds nice and it got away from everyone. So it got away from everyone, all of us. But the game's up. So these competencies are delivered through social and emotional learning through an equity lens. So don't be confused by the words, understand what they're doing. The way that this works is they will talk about, if you look into social and emotional learning in K through 12, they will talk about how they're going to teach these competencies in every grade. They will have lessons and emphasis on all of them in every grade. But there's a extremely heavy influence on the orange, which is self-awareness and self-management in the lower grades. And the reason that they focus on this is because in order to shift what they call, their words, the consciousness of the children to understand and believe in this objective truth that they're trying to push, objective truth. You must get very young children to understand that they have an identity and that their identity means something in society and they're either privileged or they're oppressed. You have to get children to understand that. So right now when you get on social media or wherever you're seeing the problems, it's small problems, it's not small, but problems here, problems there, problems there. But what they're doing, like if they're reading kindergarten, first graders, books about pronouns, they're trying to get them to understand what is my identity. Because they want them to start understanding that they have a responsibility in society. Once you get a child or anyone to understand what your identity is, you move them over to responsible decision making. And the responsible decisions that they're pushing on children are not the responsible decisions I want my children to understand. It's responsible decisions based on, are you privileged or are you oppressed? And the responsible decision means you act accordingly. That's what they're doing. So when they read stories to these children, these controversial lessons, this emphasis on things that you don't want your children to have an emphasis on, it's because they're trying to play social emotional learning. They're exploiting these young, innocent children, their emotions, their natural their natural empathy, their innocence, and they're exploiting it. Because you can go up to any child and say, whatever you want, and you'll say, do you think this is fair? And of course children are going to say no, because what do we do with children when they're very little? We say, share your toy, do all this. They're exploiting these children. Once they're making decisions awareness. There's a heavy emphasis on this, and notice it's green. That's where they want them. There's a heavy emphasis on this in the higher grades because this is where they train the activists. This is where they do lessons, and they push the idea of what are you going to do about it? You live in America, now you understand, you have an identity, you understand that there's oppression in our country of the systems, now what are you going to do about it? This is where they train the activists. Reality intervention. Social emotional learning changed the way that students learn by implementing a political teaching method that develops a radical ideology viewpoint of the world. Social emotional learning was a systemic change. So when they brought this in, across the country, it came in around 2016. There were a few districts that had a little bit before that were piloted, but most, at least 90% of the public education system in America had it by 2016. It was a systemic change because what they did was they looked at the statistics of achievement gaps, and instead of saying, you know, they could have had there's a lot of reasons you can put on that, but what they said was, well, it's because you're racist. So we have to have a systemic change to fix it. That's what they did. So they changed the way that they teach. This is how they train students to go to college, and this has been going on for a long time. I didn't graduate yesterday, and I had this training as well. Culture responsive teaching. Culture responsive teaching is a method of teaching that comes from a woman by the name of Gloria Ladson-Billings. You can look her up. She is an extremely outspoken activist who will be happy to tell you she is a critical race theorist, and that even the idea of Barack Obama being president was only to uphold white supremacy. Okay? So you understand, when you believe this theory, you believe everything is wrong until you take everything apart. She developed culture responsive teaching as an alternative to the traditional way that we think of teaching children, which is a non-biased method. This is what she said about it. Students must develop a broader socio-political consciousness that allows them to critique the cultural norms, values, mores, and institutions that produce and maintain social inequities. This is the teaching method for every subject that they are pushing. This is an activist political method, and it is not their job. Culture responsive teaching, which is CRT, the other CRT, the praxis of critical race theory, uses lessons as a way to engage students in conversations around systemic privilege and oppression. And one of the things that they do heavily, and that's why there's a lot of focus on the books right now, is that they use one of the tenets of critical race theory called counter-storytelling. So they have replaced the resources and the materials in the education system that teachers can use with counter-storytelling. So basically whatever you were told as you were growing up, especially anything that values America, they are now flooding the system with resources and materials that are counter-storytelling the opposite of that. That's why you are seeing all of this divisiveness in the books and the resources. It's because they are it's a brainwashing program. It is a 12-year brainwashing thought reform program, and they are trying to shift, again, this is their words, the consciousness of the children. And if you remember what I said in the beginning, they already determined, parents, you can't parent. You can't even teach the basic life skills that you need for your children to be successful. You certainly cannot make medical decisions for your children if you can't teach basic life skills. Culture responsive teaching exploits the experiences and emotions of children. I want to give you an example because it's often very difficult for people. It's easy if you see a worksheet that talks blatantly about what's going on. And you know, thank goodness that they put some of that out there because it helped people realize. But what people can't do and can't see and can't get their hands on is this method of teaching. So culturally responsive teaching is supposed to be used in every subject. You will also, if you go to your, at least state department, depends on how on top of things your school district is, but you will also hear them talk about cultural competence. Okay, so when they talk about that, they're talking about the environment also shifting and the culture of the school shifting to this idea. But I'm going to give you an example. You could give me any lesson that you could think this is impossible for her to turn this around. I can do it. I wish I couldn't, but I can. This is what you can't get your hands on, parents. I'm going to give you, this would be like a second grade math problem. Johnny was on the way to an amusement park with his mom and dad. The park was a total of 50 miles away. They already drove 20 miles. How many more miles do they need to drive? Everybody in this room can at least say, yep, that sounds like something I had when I was in school. But if you are a culturally responsive teacher, you use this lesson to start to shift the consciousness of the children. And this is how you would do it. I would give it to my second grade classroom, and I would say, well, you know, kids would raise their hand, and I'd be like, let's not worry about the answer right now. They don't need to know math, really. They have Google. That's what they would tell you. But let's talk about this children, right? So Johnny's on the way to an amusement park with his mom and dad. How many of you have been to an amusement park? I see a lot of you been to an amusement park, but some of you haven't. Why would it be that some of you have not been to the amusement park? You might have a kid say, my friend doesn't like the amusement park, scared of the rides, right? And then you would think, sure, that would be a good reason. But if you're culture responsive, you continue to dig and push until you get what you want to push this idea. And you say, well, what's another reason? Now remember, you're talking about second grade, 7, 8 years old. What's another reason? I could get a whole room. You could give me any second grade. I could get them all to come to the same conclusion. Well, because amusement parks, some people can't afford it. You need to make them free. That's being culture responsive. I'll give you another example. Maybe I don't want to go that route with this problem. Maybe I say, okay, let's think about this. Johnny is on the way to the park with his mom and dad. Do all families have a mom and dad? And, you know, there's going to be very innocent children that are going to go, yes? And then there's going to be other children that are going to say, well, down the street, there's 2 moms, there's 2 dads. And then you use that opportunity, if you're a culture responsive teacher, to engage these children in that conversation and what that means. That's culture responsive teaching. Do they ever get to the answer? Depends.
Doesn't matter at that point.
They don't care. They don't care. They might. But what do you see when your child comes home? You see this. You see this. You're not seeing what I'm talking about because you can't see it. So the counter storytelling, another part of social emotional learning is this massive culture shift within the schools, which clearly you are all aware of. But they had to flood the resources and materials with the counter stories. So they do it in the libraries, in online apps, in any resource. Everybody needs to pay attention to the curriculum. But if you have curriculum transparency, it's not even close to enough. They want you to look at that. They want you to focus on the curriculum because social emotional learning is not curriculum. It's not a curriculum. They want you to focus on curriculum because the library books don't count as curriculum. They want you to to focus on curriculum because the third-party resources and materials and apps that the teachers can use and have access to do not count as curriculum. So that's where they're flooding it in. And when you go and you ask the school, I want to, have access to this and see all of the materials for those third-party programs, maybe social emotional learning, whatever it is, most of the time they're going to deny you because it's protected under third-party proprietary materials, and that's done on purpose. So that is something that has to be changed, and people need to understand. I every week hear from someone saying, I appreciate what you're doing, but I feel pretty good about what's going on because we have curriculum transparency, and then I have to break the news to them that that's what they want you to think. So in the libraries, you will find a massive increase of books like this. If you have access, if you have a child in school, you will have access to this. But even if you don't, a lot of times they'll have it online. And you push at the school boards, do not let them take it offline so that anybody can see this and kind of, people need to watch this. But they will be flooding the library with books for younger kids like these. They, she, he, easy as ABC, My Princess Boy, Heather Has Two Mommies, A Tale of Two Daddies. And these books are not used as an isolated lesson. They want them to just be part of the culture. Part of the culture shift. If somebody wants to teach their children this, fine. Let our government do it. They're undermining parents. And they're doing it because they know that this will separate them from you. Separate your children from you.
Do you have any questions?
The different dragon. I just wanted to point out because it is not clear what it is, and I want people to realize you have to open the book. This is also about a same-sex marriage, and so just make sure you're not only looking at the cover. When you get to the higher grades, there will be a lot of books that will push the idea of privilege and oppression, or they will push the idea of gender ideology and sexual preference. These books stamped The Hate You Give push the idea that our country is systemically racist. It floods emotions in these books to get kids angry and put them against each other. The one in the middle, Sex, the All You Need to Know Sexuality Guide to get you through your teens and 20s. The books that are coming into the library, there's 43 states in our country that have what's called a loophole. And you could give this book, as an adult, you hand a book to a child on the street, and in 43 states you would be arrested and charged with a felony for giving pornography to a minor. But our education system does it through the loophole under the guise of education. And there's nothing educational about it. It is flat out pornographic. It is for conditioning and grooming children. It is making it normal. You break their inhibitions so that it's just normal. Social credit scores. Social emotional learning is collecting a massive amount of mental health data on children through surveys. This data is creating a psychological profile for students by analyzing their personality traits. That's a mouthful, and it's all true. Social emotional learning, when it comes into the school, you'll see this language, look for it. We'll say, this is great, you can't argue the data. You can't argue the statistics. This is data-driven. Well, it's data-driven, but it's based on their own data that they're coming up with so that they have talking points to push back on all of you. So when you hear these points, and you hear these statistics, don't buy it, and I'm going to show you why. When you understand it, they really are going to have a hard time arguing it. You bring social emotional learning into the school, and you you have to make changes to the school because it's a systemic change like I've talked about. You change a lot of things in the school. You change the way the discipline works, which actually creates more chaos. You change the teaching method. You change the resources and materials, but you make sure those things are protected from parents being able to see them. And then you use a survey. You give children a survey of very subjective questions, and you interpret it in a way that gets you the data you want, so then you can go, social emotional learning is working. So I think I saw a sign out there. Social emotional learning is good for the students. Well, that person holding that sign must have saw that data, because they are interpreting the data to get the results they want, to continue pushing this on you, and to put a barrier between you. How do you argue with the data? Well, I'll show you how. So the data is what we call a self-fulfilling prophecy. They give in-class surveys, collect student data. What they'll tell you is they're going to check on the climate of the school, or we just want to check on those kids and see how we can improve the school, or we want to check on how our program is going, so we just want to, take a survey. That's what they'll tell you. You interpret the data through an equity lens. Okay? The equity lens is through the viewpoint of someone who believes our country is oppressive. Those results are stored and evaluated on every child. If you have a child in the public education system right now, the government has a psychological profile that they've been building on them. These surveys actually are clusters of questions that they use to profile their personality traits, and it's stored by our government. The results require changes to the school culture, and then the students are radicalized by those changes, and then you start the process over. And this is a never-ending cycle. They will do this until they run these schools off of the cliff. I'm going to give you an example. This is actually one of the questions. And so, again, they play games with the words. So if you go in there and you say, I want to see this survey, I'm going to determine for myself if it's okay. That's fine and that's good, but understand what they're doing with it. Because this question doesn't sound bad. How confident are you that you can complete all the work that is assigned in your classes? First of all, if you're a good teacher, you're going to know if your kids feel confident about that. You don't need a survey. But that question doesn't sound bad. But what they do is they put it through an equity lens. And this is what that equity lens would determine. The scores indicate school culture is suppressing their ability to complete work. So what do? You have to make a change. It's a systemic change. It's for the collective good. So the intervention, because of that data, would be increased counseling services for students with lower scores to investigate ways to improve school culture. Bring in more Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ representation, flags, and clubs. Add more social justice and sexuality books to the library. And then when you have parents come to the school and say, what the heck are you doing? You hold up your fraudulent data and say, nope, we have the data. This should be terrifying, and this is the one issue when I talk about social emotional learning, that it doesn't matter if you're from the right, left, center, you know nothing about politics, it doesn't matter. I can get people from across the board to agree, no, I don't want the government building a psychological profile for my child. What they're doing is they are building a social credit score for your children, and this didn't happen in the last year or 2 years. It has been in the schools since at least 2016. Some schools longer if they were a pilot school. They're going to use that data. They are going to use that data. I'll give you an example. A lot of talk right now about the Second Amendment and red flag laws. You give this a couple of years, you allow them to continue building this, and your child graduates high school and they want to practice their Second Amendment, and they go to apply for their permit or whatever they need in the state, and they go to purchase their firearm, they're going to pull up these profiles and they're going to say, you know what, this child had a rough couple years. 5th and 6th grade didn't go very well. We better put them on a restriction. And again, based on fraudulent data, I wouldn't interpret that data that way, but our government is. All of this data is being put into, your state has it, it's called a statewide, I'll finish up here in just a couple minutes. It's called a statewide longitudinal data system. So you can look it up for Massachusetts. Something you might notice is they will list it as P-W20. The reason they call it that is because these scores are preschool through the workforce. It's a lifelong score that they're building. And you can look this up. You'll find it. And right now our government is pumping massive amounts of money to the states that the states apply for grants. Every grant that comes into your state or your school, you read it. If they're not just going to have a petting zoo outside for the kids to learn about animals, tell them no. The grants are they're toxic to the school. You have to be very careful. You will see everywhere, more data, more data. This is what they're talking about. There is no reason. They don't need the grants. They don't need more money to teach real academics. They're taking in the money and then they get tied in to building more profiles for your children. Social emotional learning is a trauma-informed practice that places every child in a mental health intervention system. This system requires school counselors to work as social justice advocates who shift the school culture to emphasize racism, gender ideology, and sexual preference. This systemic change is disguised by innocuous language, such as welcoming and safe schools. When you hear welcoming and safe schools, this is what we're talking about. Because before they brought in all of this insanity, schools were welcoming and safe. They were welcoming and safe. And they took care of kids based on their individual needs if they needed them, whether it was an academic need, a behavioral need, an emotional need. We had services for all of those needs. When they brought in social emotional learning, they decided it's not the child that we need to fix, it is the system. It's the adults. It's the parents that are bringing their kids to school. That's the problem. We have to fix the system, not the kids. So since social emotional learning is a trauma-informed practice, it placed every single child into what's called an MTSS, multi-tiered system of support. This is a framework that we used before social emotional learning. I'll give you a very basic example. If you had a child that came to school that was dyslexic, or actually came to school with a true situation of trauma. You're adults, we all understand that happens. So we need, we want the schools to be looking out for children. They're exploiting that and taking advantage of it. Social emotional learning came in, it placed every single child, not based on an individual need, but based on the idea that they are raised in a systemically oppressive country. Put them all into MTSS, interventions, mental health services. Social emotional learning is tier 1 mental health service. So if you have a child in school, you didn't know that, probably. I would assume. Most people don't. But now they're, without your permission, giving them mental health services. The teachers push the classroom shift. The teachers use the new teaching method. Not all of them. We have some older teachers, but quite honestly, they're being held captive at this point. They're prisoners of this. They know it's not right. They just want to teach the children and retire. But the ones that are coming out of the colleges have been trained this way. And they don't know any different. But the school counselors, and there's always someone in the room who's like, what? This is not your guidance counselor. This is not, they have changed it. school counselors, and they don't like to be called guidance counselors anymore because that implies that you're looking at a schedule and saying, well, you need to have this next history class. They changed it to be school counselors, and they, in their documentation, are now what they call social justice activists. And this is your school counselors in every single public educated school. All of them. And they all follow the guidelines of a national model, even if they don't have a certificate from this place. It's called the American School Counseling Association, ASCA is what we call them. And they are responsible for pushing this massive culture shift. And about time here, but this is extremely important. The school counselors are exploiting, just like everything else in social emotional learning, and taking advantage of the idea of confidentiality. If you have a child that comes to school that's truly being abused, you want people looking out for them and to report it correctly, instead of calling the parent and saying, hey, is your child being abused, right? I mean, we have to have some guards like that. But they're exploiting it. And now, instead of working with the parents, they assume that the children are coming from homes that are at risk for abuse. They assume that it's possible, right out of the gate, that you're all abusers. And I'm not talking about what we traditionally you would think of abuse. They use the confidentiality clause, and if you go to your school counselor now, and again, because it's trauma-informed, school counselors now service every child in the school, all of them. And so a child can go to that counseling service at any time, and all they have to do is say, fill in the blank. I am 15 and I'm pregnant. I'm afraid to tell my parents. Okay? They said, I'm afraid to tell my parents. Done. Now they won't tell you because you could be the abuser. I am a boy and I think I'm a girl, but my parents don't believe me and I'm afraid to tell them. You are now the abuser. And they will hide it from you. They say the right things. We want to work with parents. But the parents they want to work with are the parents that are willing to put their children in the car and drive them to the clinic to be mutilated for the idea of transgenderism. Those are the parents they'll work with. But if your child comes to them and says, I'm afraid to tell my parents, again, fill in the blank, they can now deem you the abuser and hide it from you. And all across this country, we have children identifying as animals. We have children that go to school, and there are transition closets that the schools have clothes in, and the children can come and go by a different name, use a different restroom, a locker room, go to the closet before school starts, change their clothes, and assume a new identity, and they will not tell you. In fact, I've been involved with 2 lawsuits now, and the counselors had a meeting with all of the teachers that child had in their schedule and said, when you talk to the parents, you've used their legal name, and we are not telling them. Now you say, well, how could they do that? Because they're not actually changing the documents. That's how they do it. If they change the documents, if they actually change the legal document, they have to tell you, so they just don't. I know this sounds really out there, but this is what's happening to your children. This is what is happening. And so we have to first know what's happening, and then we have to stand up. So I'll just leave you with a call to action. Understand the language of Marxism. This is a Marxist revolution. And they're taking advantage and doing it to your children because they're innocent and they're easy targets. They can't do it to adults because there's too many adults that had a good education and understand what's happening. So they're doing it to your children. James Lindsay he has a website called New Discourses. If you want to understand, he goes into depth on all of this, but understand that what they say is not what they mean. Break down the SEL system and players. I have been fortunate to work with an organization called Courage is a Habit, and courageisthehabit.org. You'll hear hear a little bit more about it in a minute, but they have a decoding system that will help you because the language is hard to see through. It really is. Don't give labels power. If you're an adult and you are called something and you can't stand up to it, imagine what your children are going to go through. Do not give labels power. Speak the truth. Speak what you want for your children, and don't back down. Organize and stay engaged. This is a fantastic gathering here. And honestly, Lori, thank you so much. Amazing. Because people need this information. Honestly. Opt out of the surveys. You still have the right to get out of the surveys, but you need to tell everybody you know. And you have to stay on top of it. So get out of the surveys. There are still ways they will collect data, but that is a big one. And Purchase to Have It has a form for you if you go to their website that you can get that will help you understand and explain to other people why you need to get out of the surveys. Get them out of the data. Even if you want some of this to be pushed onto society, get your children out of the data. They're going to use it against, it's weaponizing the government against your children. Watch the grants and contracts. Again, I made a joke earlier about the animals, but really, our schools have plenty of money. You know it because you pay taxes. They can teach academics, but they need the grant money to push this crap on your children. Stop the grants. They don't need anything else. And then bring on the lawsuit. This is a constitutional violation. There's many angles that you can take. I don't know if Massachusetts was one. I think maybe it was not, but I was at least fortunate over the summer in Tennessee. They were one of the states that banned critical race theory. And so we have launched a massive landmark lawsuit to sue the school district because social emotional learning is a blatant violation of the critical race theory ban. So even if you don't have it in Massachusetts, tell anyone that you know that might be in a state that has it. We're hoping for a domino effect, but it also is very telling. And even if your state doesn't have the ban, it is still a violation of your parental rights. It's a violation of religious freedom. When they're asking your children to push pronouns on them, that's compelled speech. Sue the hell out of them. I got a little bit over. I seriously thank you so much, and thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Big round of applause.
The next speaker on our Citizens for Responsible Education forum, What is Social Emotional Learning, is Michael King, MFS, Director of Community Alliances, and he is a speaker that will communicate our more influential type of activities. Prior to Michael's role at Massachusetts Family Institute, he served as Family Ministries Director at a local church and principal of a K-12 Christian school. He has a bachelor's degree in political science from Messiah College and a master's degree in Christian leadership from Liberty University. Michael networks with local pastors and church leaders to educate and motivate people to stand up for righteousness in the public square. He continues to promote MFI's groundbreaking book, Engage the Bay State, which clearly defines the culture war we find ourselves in today between the concepts of the Bible and secular human thinking. He hopes to inspire Christians to engage with their local government about the biblical foundations of marriage, life, and religious liberty. Michael has been a constant program on MFS, and he has meetings that are conducted on a weekly basis, and he has something to say in regard to our education system, and we will listen to his presentation, which comes now at this stage of the program. I know that the program is lengthy, but the messages are definitely need to be heard and understood by our leaders in our school committees and in our governments. Our school committee is not totally independent, and it needs to be addressed because our school committees are only blindly following the rules that are being dictated to our education departments by the Massachusetts Board of Education and our legislators. There are many activities that are taking place in our legislature that dictate what kind of education we will conduct in our schools.
Promotes contraception and abortion to children like saran wrap. Did you guys know this? Saran wrap, and not microwavable, non-microwavable saran wrap as a contraceptive when you're in a pinch. Promotes peer-to-peer sex ed or sexual rights advocacy, undermines traditional values and belief, undermines parents, we learned more about that tonight, or parental rights, and refers children to harmful resources. Many of the sex ed programs that are being taught in your schools rate at a 13, 14, or 15 out of 15 on this scale, okay? So we would make the argument that you want to get your kids out of sex ed. Would you guys agree with that? Okay? In any school, okay? And also K through 12, okay? So you guys heard earlier tonight, how many kids opted out of sex ed in Worcester last year? 3,850 kids. That is historic. That is unprecedented. Just to give you just to compare that, 2 years ago, you know how many kids opted out of sex ed before we got involved in Worcester? 5. Wow. Okay. So it can be done. Okay, it can be done, and we want to work with you to do that. Because let's get our kids at least out of sex ed. And I just want to talk about just a few of these sex ed programs. So Get Real by Planned Parenthood. Does anyone have an issue with Planned Parenthood teaching sex ed? I mean, does it make sense that Planned Parenthood would teach safe sex? Does that make any logical sense, right? Because if you're Planned Parenthood, what do you make money off of? Abortion. And what do you need for an abortion?
And selling baby parts.
That's true. That's exactly right.
Not
but what
just
do you need?
Abortion.
But what do you need for abortion? You need what? Pregnancy, right? Sex, right? So how are you going to get pregnant with safe sex? Does that make any sense? No, you're going to sexualize children so that they have an unwanted pregnancy, because if you get that 12-year-old addicted to your birth control, you've got a client for life. Our Whole Lives, developed by the Unitarian Universalist Association and the United Church of Christ, and Making Proud Choices by Planned Parenthood. Let's just take a look at just a few quotes from these. So this is 6th grade, as young as 11 years old. Discusses getting a girl drunk so boyfriend can make out with her. Guys, this is 11 years old. Introduces masturbation by older brother. And these are just some examples. Involves scenario with sexually active older sibling, making younger child keep it a secret from parents. This is 7th grade, as young as 12-year-olds. List of dating behaviors include touching under a person's clothes and having sex. Again, statutory rape is what? Under 16, right? So are we kind of teaching something that's illegal, right? Could you make that argument? Explains that a dental dam is placed over the vulva or anus during oral sex, and that saran wrap can be used for this purpose. Presents role-playing scenario where a boy asks a girl if they can try having a sex without a condom, and the boy says he can pull out before he comes. Again, that's 7th grade. And I'm going to kind of go, because this is all kind of the same stuff. Here's a chart from grade 8. So here it says weight, okay? This is in the Get Real curriculum. So, okay, they're teaching abstinence. Does abstinence work 100% of the time? Yes. Is it medically accurate? Yes. Should it be taught like 100% of the time? We think so. But these are all the other options, including the Depo shot, which is 3 months of birth control shot into your 12-year-old girl's arm, many times without parental consent. What do you guys need for a Tylenol for your 12-year-old girl at school? You need parental consent, right? But for a depot shot, you don't need it. Something wrong with that. Also, if you thought that was bad enough, you have this whole other list here, including the dental dam for contraceptive. So are we sexualizing children? Of course we are. Okay, you got to get your kids out of sex ed. It's perfectly normal. This is a book that is the core curriculum for these sex ed programs, especially Our Whole Lives, taught to 10 to 15-year-olds. It contains 67 nude illustrations, including children masturbating, adults having sex, and a male putting on a condom. Many of you guys have probably seen this is a very popular book. It just came out with the 2021 edition. Our Whole Lives, this is put out by a church, okay? Grades 4 through 6, so again, age 10 through 12. Divided into 10 workshops and utilizes the sexuality explicit book as perfectly normal as a core text. Asserts that sexuality is something you have from the moment you are born. A section called When Would I Encourage Children to Consider What Age They Might Be When They Watch Pornography. Let someone see them nude, bathe or shower with someone, masturbate with someone, or have sexual intercourse with someone. And affirms gender fluidity and non-conformity. And then guys, just a lot of the same stuff. I won't bore you with all the details, but this is grades 4 through 12, okay? Our Whole Lives. Making Proud Choices. This is, again, Planned Parenthood. Essentially a how-to manual for sexual activity utilizing role play, encouraging teens to act out various sexual scenarios. Implies that many, if not most, teenagers are sexually active. So again, we're just going to assume you're going to be sexually active, so we have to tell you how to be sexually active in so many different ways because we can't stop you. We can't encourage you to be responsible. This curriculum encourages detailed condom demonstrations using penis models as just ways to make condom use more pleasurable, and so forth and so on. You get the idea. And then a lot of these role plays are again, insinuate behaviors. So your parents are out late, your boyfriend or girlfriend comes over hoping to have sex with you. And again, this is under the age of 16. So again, over-sexualizing our children. CSE is not evidence-based. It does not meet the objective that they say it does. They claim that CSE proponents claim that their approach to sex ed delays sexual debut in minors and decreases unhealthy risk. Guys, do you need a survey to tell you this, right? I mean, this is obvious that this would make kids more sexually active. Out of 60 school-based CSE studies examined, no evidence of continued effectiveness at reducing teen pregnancy or instance of sexually transmitted infections was found because Planned Parenthood needs pregnancy to get to abortion. Does that make sense? Right? Okay. So we'll keep moving. Informed and in charge. This is in many of your schools. This is in Lynn, for example, and they teach quite a few things with this. And again, it comes in many names. So you guys might see this and say, informed and in charge. Well, that sounds okay, right? I mean, the marketing department is genius on a lot of this stuff. Refer students to the sexuality tree. You guys ever hear of the family tree? Wouldn't it be great to have the family tree back in the school? But instead we have the sexuality tree, where students are instructed to discuss and list sexual activities such as fetish, fantasy, pornography, abortion, and sex toys in sections on the worksheet. The top of the tree is for listing items that might apply to the people you are dating or having sex with. And then it refers you to websites like Scarleteen that are very pornographic. And there, my friends, is the sexuality tree. I won't get into it, but man, I wish we had the family tree back. The 3 R's is being taught at Revere and Mansfield. This is also being taught at Worcester, where we had 3,850 kids opt out. This is a K through 12 sex ed curriculum. Think about the 3 R's, guys. 3 R's, according to Advocates for Youth, is rights, respect, responsibility. But we would love the 3 R's to be reading, writing, arithmetic, right? And I understand that arithmetic starts with an A, and I understand writing starts with a W, okay? I did go to school a generation ago. 3 R's, like I said, K through 12 curriculum for ages 5 to 18, okay? Kindergarten. And just some quotes, I won't say them all. Let's just go to grade 9, lesson 7, page 1. Ask students, when do you think someone is ready to have sex, either oral, vaginal, or anal, with their partner? Again, grade 9. So be encouraged. Back in 2019, we showed up at the Worcester School Committee There were about 150 people there. We represented half of those people. This is some pictures from the evening. This is when Planned Parenthood wanted to pass Making Proud Choices in the city of Worcester. We showed up. I read directly out of the curriculum. The name of the worksheet was Redefining Abstinence. It had 35 terms. One of the terms was kissing behind the knees is somehow abstinence, okay? I'm not going to go into it. But I read the 35 terms, the superintendent sitting right there next to the mayor. Because of our testimony that night in Worcester, they said no to Planned Parenthood, okay? So you can make a difference. And there's just some more pictures from the evening. So many people in attendance. When's the last time you saw a school committee meeting that full, right? Now, all of you guys, if all these people here went to your school committee meeting, maybe once a month, imagine the change you could bring in your town or city. And we're happy to work alongside you. So again, 3,850 students have opted out of sex education in Worcester. If you want to learn more about, just in general, our mission to get kids out of sex ed, I want you to text the word education to 87891. Text the word education to 87891. That is our short code, and you will get a return text with more information. And then we talked about the books tonight. We don't need to get too far into it because you guys have a pretty good idea of what's going on. We talked about the websites that your kids are sent to. Bedsider, I mean some great names here, guys. Scarletine, Sex Etc. That they're being sent to by the curriculum. Dangerous transgender ideology. Why do 1 out of 5 kids today in Gen Z struggle with gender identity? 1 out of 5. That doesn't even include orientation. So when we talk about human sexuality, we're talking about half of our children are struggling, are confused, are questioning their human sexuality. When you start to question as a man if you are a woman, that is going to have an effect on your emotions, on your physical, all parts of you that's going to affect, right? I mean, back in 2015, the DSM, right, the psychological journal, had called transgenderism a mental illness. Okay, now that is not hate speech. Okay, that was a medical understanding. And now 7 years later, we call it gender dysphoria, and now we're cutting off breasts and penises. Transgender is being promoted in our schools through various means, including anti-bullying programs like Jump Karate Safe Schools program for LGBTQ youth. The Triton schools had Jeff, I know, a few years back, okay, to have this presentation. Storybooks in the classroom, social transition parties, comprehensive sex education, diversity, equity, inclusion directors, books in school libraries like Beyond Magenta by Susan Kukla. This is the Beyond Magenta book. In many of your school libraries, author and photographer Susan Kukla interviewed 6 transgender or gender-neutral youth. And one of the quotes from the book, from 6 up, I used to kiss other guys in my neighborhood, make out with them, perform oral sex on them. I liked it. I used to love oral, and I touched their you-know-whats. We were young, but that's what we did. This is what's being taught for transgenderism in preschool through high school. So in our elementary schools, we have the genderbread person, okay, that teaches kids that your gender comes from your brain and has nothing to do with your anatomy. So gender identity is a social construct, okay? So you remember that video on Libs of TikTok where the first grade teacher is like, well, I have to guess. The doctor has to guess what your gender is when you're born. I don't know if you guys saw this video or not. Okay, but of course the doctor has to guess because gender identity is a social construct and he has no idea what you're going to choose when you're 5 years old. Does that make sense? No, it doesn't. It's not medically accurate, but that's the interpretation kids are getting at school. The gender unicorn with 5 different spectrums between male and female with 70 different options in between is taught in what grade? Preschool. 4-year-olds. 4-year-olds. And then you have the gender snowman, not snowman, snow person, okay? So be aware of what they're being taught in your school. And then guys, check this out. This is high school. Right? Yeah, we'll get to Q&A later, but I appreciate the question. Yeah. The spectrum, this is in your high school, okay? This was sent to us. Check. Uh-oh.
There's a power button, try holding it down.
Somebody doesn't want me speaking. All right, we're back. All right, so this is the spectrum, guys. Read this with me. Well, you don't have to read it out loud with me, okay? Because that might be kind of difficult with a crowd this size. But look, our sexuality and gender identity are not set in stone. Is that medically accurate? No. Thank you. In fact, people's identities can be fluid. The spectrum can help you visualize how you feel at any given time. Mark how you identify today in each line, but don't feel limited. It's okay to mark something different when? Someone say it. If you can read, maybe our eyesight's off, but tomorrow. So can your gender change in 24 hours? No. Okay, it's not medically accurate, guys. Okay? Look at this, biological sex, what the doctor assigned you at birth between male and female. Okay, well, he has to guess. Gender presentation, how the world sees you. What if you were that 12-year-old boy where your voice hadn't changed like me as a 12-year-old and you were singing what section of the choir? Because you had a high voice. Soprano section, right? And in my generation in the mid-90s, giving away my age a little bit, but in the mid-90s when I was singing in the soprano section, I thought it was awesome. Because I was the only guy with all the girls, right? But today, if you're that same kid, little Johnny, with all the girls, might you question? See the danger of how that could be a real slippery slope. So this is being taught, this was sent to us by a parent, like I said, on the North Shore. So fast facts about transgenderism, you'll find this on your table, the parent resource guide. I hope all of you take that home with you tonight. A very helpful tool to understand this whole transgender agenda. And some of the things mentioned in there, you'll find one study showed that when a teen announces a transgender identity to their peer group, the number of friends who also become transgender identified was 3.5 per group. This is a social contagion. This isn't something that kids are just going to deal with naturally most of the time. This is a social contagion, okay? Also, girls as young as 13 are undergoing double mastectomies, and boys as young as 17 are undergoing full genital sex reassignment surgeries. Also, we talked about surveys tonight from an organization called Panorama. This is one of the CRT surveys, and this question was sent to us by a parent in Hanover, Massachusetts. If you read the top, you can see how inappropriate this is. I would be willing to have a sexual relationship with a black person. They're asking that to 17-year-old girls. The English teacher who gave the survey told the students, the 17-year-old seniors in English class, think about that, okay, so it could show up anywhere, math class, English class, says lie about your age because you have to be 18 to take the survey. So she said change the date of your birth, okay, so we can take the survey together. So that was just one part, but now you're asking a 17-year-old girl amongst her peers and boys, would you like, I'm going to assume you have sexual relationships as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, but then to say, would you have it with a black person? And if you hesitate one bit, well, you are a racist. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. The parent that saw this has about, I think she has like over 50,000 followers on Instagram. So she put it out there. She went to the school committee meeting, and they've done away with the survey, okay? So good things are happening in that regard.
Just a reminder, stay nice and close.
I will, okay. Sure. So know what's being taught to your kids in the schools. Inappropriate books. We talked about the Sora app. This was revealed to us by our good friend Lori, who mentioned this was on, she probably doesn't mind me saying, it was on one of her children's phones. Okay, this is an app on your phone, and your kid gets a username and password, but you as the parent don't, okay? And they can get all of this information right on their phone, and this is what they will get when they search under gender. And you'll find the Gender Queer book and all other kinds of pornographic explicit material on the app. Resources for parents in schools. So I mentioned Parent Resource Guide. Please take that with you home tonight. Also, if you haven't already, join the Massachusetts Informed Parents Facebook page. How many of you guys are on the Massachusetts Informed Parents Facebook page? Awesome. Okay, you want to get on that. If you're still on Facebook, get on MIP, and you'll join 8,000 parents in Massachusetts that share our same concerns and are sharing things that are going in their town and city. We're putting together a sex ed map for you. So like you can text the word Newburyport to 87891 or Danvers to 87891. We've done public records requests in pretty much every town and city. As that information comes back, we populate the map. Of the towns and cities that surround Newburyport, we have these different towns and cities. So I mentioned Danvers and Newburyport as the two we have information on. So if you live in those towns or cities, or you have friends, text those words individually to 87891 tonight for more information. We can and we must act. Action changes things. Find out what is happening in your school district. Opt your child out of sex ed. Join MIP on Facebook. Schedule a parent forum for your church or community group. Petition your school district to teach SRA, which is sex risk avoidance, instead of CSC. Run for school committee. I want to encourage you guys. We put out a mass text. I don't know how many of you guys get our text, but we put out a mass text the other day, just one text saying run for school committee. We got almost 100 people to respond to run for school committee in Massachusetts, okay? That was just one text. And start a local parents group and homeschool or private school. If you haven't noticed already, guys, there's a major movement to exit the public school. Have you guys noticed this, right? In 2020, you know how much homeschooling went up in Massachusetts? From 1.5% to 12.1%. It was an 800% increase in homeschooling in Massachusetts. Actually, one of the largest increases in the nation happened in Massachusetts. So school trends, and I want to point this out, especially churches, guys. Churches are starting the one-room schoolhouse again, okay? That is a movement that is happening. A lot of people can't afford a private school if they want to get their kids out of the public school. So churches are starting learning pods, learning centers. There's a great church, I think it's called Great Rock, not too far from here in Peabody. Danvers. Is it Danvers? Yeah. In Danvers. They just started a learning center, okay? And I hear great things about it, okay? If you want information on alternatives to the public school, I want you to text the word school option to 87891. Text the word school option to 87891 and you'll get a list, a pretty comprehensive list of about 100 different options in Massachusetts for you to choose from. So there you go. Text the word school option to 87891. At Massachusetts Family Institute, we'd much rather have, we'd love to see the return of prayer into schools. I think we'd all think that's a good thing, right? The return of biblical principles like love your neighbor. Would that be a great concept, right? To have back into our schools. So I want to tell you just an encouraging story. I told you about Lynn. This is Rosa in the middle. She wanted to start a Bible club at Linvo Tech a few years ago. So she put up posters. What do you think the principal told her? Take them down. There's a separation between church and state. So we had spoken at her church, so she knew who to call. She calls us. We sent a kind letter to her principal the same day. Same day the principal gets the letter, he goes back to Rosa and says, Rosa, I made a mistake. Please put your posters back up. She puts her posters back up. That spring, she sings a song, a worship song called Waymaker. I don't know if you guys have heard the song Waymaker. They sing it in Spanish at the talent show, and they win first place. Pretty cool, right? If you're interested in your church, your community group, even I had a grandparent that wanted to start a learning center in their living room, okay? Text the word POD to 87891 to get a vision for what we're trying to do with the return of the one-room schoolhouse. Run for school committee. Text the word school to 87891 and join the 100 people that already responded to run for school committee. We have an online training for you, whether you've run for school committee or you're doing it for the first time. Text the word school to 87891. I'm sure Sean Gallagher would absolutely love to have you on the school committee in Newburyport. Victory in Somerville. Did you guys know that in Somerville there's a 1,000-member Hispanic church called Vida Real? Vida Real wanted to start a Christian school in the city of Somerville. So do you think the Somerville subcommittee of the school committee wanted to okay this Christian school? Of course not. They said, according to the law, you have to meet the standard of the public school in Somerville. Well, that's not too hard these days. But anyway, they said, well, in order to do that, you have to teach LGBTQ for human sexuality. Now, part of the whole reason Vida Real is starting a school is because they want to teach a biblical understanding of human sexuality, right? So we helped them. We had some attorneys show up at the school committee meeting, and lo and behold, they won 8-1 to start their school. So now they have the first Christian school in Somerville. Jennifer talked about parental rights and the attack on parental rights. In Ludlow, this school allegedly hid the information of a gender transition from parents, okay? So now we have a federal lawsuit to challenge this violation of parental rights, and it could be that the first lawsuit like this, or one of the first to have a victory, might just come out of where? Massachusetts. Wouldn't that be great? Victory, no MIAA DEI pledge. If you can tell me what MIAA DEI means, I'll give you $5. No, probably you guys are really educated. MIAA, you guys know what that is, right? Massachusetts Interscholastic Athletic Association, okay? So Newburyport, part of the MIAA, right, for sports. They wanted to mandate the DEI pledge, the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion pledge, which basically means a lot of different things, but it also means that boys can play on girls' teams, right? Did you guys just see in North Carolina, the boy that slammed the volleyball onto the girl's face and, like, I think broke her nose or something? Okay, crazy. Anyway, our attorneys called the MIAA and said, this is unconstitutional. You can't force kids to take a pledge in order to play a sport. Would you guys agree with that? Yeah. So they said, you know what, you're right. You caught us, okay? We shouldn't be doing it. So instead of really telling all these schools, from what I understand, they just kept silent, really didn't give much instruction to the schools. And so I called about 25 athletic directors and I said, did you get our kind letter about what's going on at the MIAA DEI pledge? And one athletic director said, yeah, I got your nasty letter. I was like, oh, I know where this is going. But I will tell you, the vast majority of the ADs that I called were on our page, okay? One AD said, yeah, I got your letter. I forwarded it right away to council. They told us to take it off the website, okay? So we are making a difference to, keep things like this from being a slippery slope when it comes to human sexuality. This is the DEI pledge, and what we were concerned about, and maybe you as a parent might have seen this pledge in Newburyport, support the diversity, equity, and inclusion, sportsmanship, and game officials committees policy programs within the MIAA. That looks very sterile, right? You wouldn't think that's a big deal, so you probably just go ahead and sign it and be done with it, Get your kid registered and play the sport. But you have to understand what this really means. And so now, our understanding is that this is no longer mandated in Massachusetts. So a bunch of information on your table. I do not want to collect any information on tables when I leave tonight, so please take that information with you to educate you on what's going on. And more than anything, please leave your cell phone and your email address on the sign-up sheet on your table, because guys, if you like the fact that we had 4,000 kids opt out in Worcester, the reason we were able to do that is because we had people's cell phones and we could text them information in Worcester specifically. We had 400 people text the word Worcester to 87891. So now we had 400 cell phones to start with in Worcester, okay? So it makes a huge difference. So please leave your cell phone and your email address on those papers before you leave. If you'd like to get media that tells the stories I'm telling you tonight, you might not hear these in the Boston Globe, but you will hear them in the New Boston Post, okay? So newbostonpost.com for $40 a year. You can subscribe to a conservative online newspaper in Massachusetts. MFI, I just want to encourage you with this. So we are up against a lot of different organizations in Massachusetts that have millions of dollars to fight against the values that we believe in. For the first time in our 31-year history, we have $1 million budget, okay? So we're very proud of that, and we want to continue to hire people that can help you guys fight for liberty and fight for life and parental rights and all these things that we care about. Some of you were at our banquet recently where we had 520 people show up to celebrate our victories this year. Quickest we've ever sold out in our history. So things are happening, guys. Be encouraged. Victories, even in Massachusetts, are happening. So more than anything, like I said at the beginning, I just want to encourage you that you are not alone and you are not crazy for having the understanding that you do of human sexuality, of these books, right? I want to encourage you to text one more keyword, because this is how we get information out, but with the books, I want you to text the word books to 87891. Text the word books to 87891. You will get a link and several other pieces of information, but one really important piece that many people are not aware of is you will get a link to a website called booklooks.org. Booklooks.org. And that is an incredible website. that has already done an analysis of all of these books for you, okay? It's like getting Cliff Notes for all the concerning books in your library and gives you a 4 out of 5, a 5 out of 5, a 3 out of 5 analysis of those books. And then you can take that information to your school committee and just read it for 3 minutes. I'm telling you, that makes a huge difference when you do that. So I encourage you guys, show up at your school committee once a month, take the 3 minutes that you have and just read a book, okay? And imagine if a fourth of you did that at the next school committee meeting. Would that be powerful? Of course it would. So guys, if we just get educated tonight, but we don't do anything with it, this is all a big waste of time, right? But if you join us in this effort, that's why we put these things out by keywords. Text word books to 87891. Join our 8 o'clock Zoom call on Monday nights. Meet parents from all over the state that are doing this exact thing. Get encouraged. Know that you're not alone, because I'm telling you, I see it on the ground that parents are starting to win on these issues. They really are, even in Massachusetts. I mean, I'm looking at my friend Alex here from Wakefield. Just had a parent forum the other week, right? Had over 200 people register for that online, right? That's just in Wakefield, right? And how many kids left the public school, did you say, in Wakefield in the past 3 years? 200. 200, just in Wakefield, right? You know how many kids left the public school in Worcester in the past 3 years? 1,000, okay? So this is a real thing, and you guys got to keep pushing the envelope, and we want to work with you to do that. So be encouraged. You are not alone, even in Massachusetts. Thanks so much.
So the brief statement at the conclusion of the presentation of what is social emotional learning, we asked, or the Citizens for Responsible Education asked the audience to ask questions and have answers responding from the 2 speakers that were invited to speak at this presentation. The questions are very direct, and they do have a response, but there are more questions than answers that can be given. So we need to explore this subject further, and this has to be addressed in all our communities, not just Amesbury and Newburyport and all the North Shore communities. Danvers also needs to address this issue. So, without further ado, let's go into the questions and answers, and then a conclusion of the presentation that was held in Newburyport. Thank you.
So we're going to transition to, may I get one more big round of applause for our speakers. So we are going to transition to a Q&A session that can last, I don't know, I don't want to obligate them all night long. I know that I spoke with Lori. She said that we're willing to be here till midnight to answer questions, but I'm sure the speakers don't want to stay that long. So I appeal to you, if you're looking to ask a question, can you just raise your hand at this time so I can take a quick accounting? Doesn't look like all of that many questions. If you're physically able to get up and line up behind this camera here, it would be much appreciated. If you're physically unable to get up and stand here while you ask your question, I'll bring the microphone to you. I think the best thing that I could do is maybe, do you want to stand up here with me, or do you want to just stand by and let them direct your questions to you? Here's what I suggest is, ask me your question, I'll relay it through the speaker system, and then they can address they can answer.
Great. Hi, I'm Jamie Grant. I'm a citizen here in Newburyport. I have 2 kids in the public schools. They're both in NHS, and they've gone all the way through public schools here in Newburyport. I've been active in the schools. I just finished 2 years on the school council for NHS, and I was on the board of trustees for the charter school here down the street for 3 years. So really involved with my church. I go to St. James Episcopal Church in Amesbury. So my first question is about surveys. Jennifer, you advised us to opt out of surveys because the government is building a profile on our kids. I'm curious, does that profile identify my kids by name?
Yes, it does. They will tell you it's anonymous, but when they take these surveys, it's through a Chromebook or some type of technology. It is connected to their student IDs, which is connected to their social security numbers, and this is all trackable. And your schools can, because Obama gutted the FERPA and PPRA Student Privacy Acts, they can give this information to anyone, any organization or company that they deem a authorized representative. So all of these third-party organizations that are infiltrating our school can get that and are likely getting that data.
And just be clear, because I think we all want to know, you're not just being general about public schools. Generally, you actually know that Newburyport is tracking this information about our kids by name.
Yeah, yes, all of it's going into these statewide longitudinal data systems.
Wow, that's incredible. You said school counselors are required to be social justice advocates. Did you mean specifically in Newburyport?
So ASCA, the American School Counseling Association, provides the national model that is the guidelines framework for the school counselors in the education system. Any system that they use, that your school uses that isn't specifically ASCA will parallel ASCA. And so, yes, it is here in Newburyport.
Wow. So thank you for speaking tonight. I was shocked to learn about CRT tonight, and the fact that CRT is based on the premise that the U.S. Constitution was originally written to uphold white supremacy. I didn't study CRT in school, but I did study political science and the Constitution. Article 1 of the Constitution, written by our founding forefathers, which despite the fact that they're all white men, it actually articulates how congressional representatives will be apportioned, right? Do you want to say it or should I?
Go ahead.
They shall be apportioned among the states according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by the whole number of free persons, excluding Indians, and including 3/5 of all other persons.
That's me. I'm a 3/5.
So I would say that if you look at the U.S. Constitution the way it was originally written, it does encapsulate white supremacy. And that wasn't changed until the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment.
That was a compromise.
In 1866, it doesn't matter if it was a compromise, it was white supremacy.
So it's not, ask a question. Excuse me, can you no, let's just.
Can you ask a question? Is your question regarding whether our Constitution depicted white supremacy or whether it depicted the times?
Excuse me, I want him to define what he means
exactly,
by white supremacy.
that's what I asked.
Can you just please define it, with all due respect?
Sure. When the Constitution was written, white people, freed men, were allowed to vote, and they were allowed to own land.
I'm asking you to define white supremacy.
I don't want, so there's a line of people who want to ask questions.
Sure.
And so I don't want to deflect from the forum.
Sure, I made my point, thank you.
I think that part of the beauty of our system is our ability to amend it. So even if there are mistakes or if there was things that we've done wrong in the past, there were mechanisms built into the Constitution to allow us to rectify those harms. And as far as I can tell, they have been fixed.
Yes, 100 years later.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can you define it though, please?
I would like to make a correction from this exercise of historical ignorance. I will be brief. We are different than we were then.
But the examples he's giving are utterly misleading and incorrect. Number one, Indians were a separate nation. We dealt with them, the United States government dealt with them the way they dealt with France or England, because they recognized their independence as a separate people, and they didn't vote, because they weren't part of the United States, technically. As for the 3/5 thing, I do not understand why people do not understand this and misinterpret it. The South, the slaveholders wanted blacks to be 100% included in the apportionment because they owned that vote. The slaves didn't get to vote. The North didn't want people who were effectively disenfranchised to be counted as representatives so their white masters could use their population. So the 3 vote was a compromise. It was an inelegant, ugly compromise. But no representation would have been the anti-slavery position and the pro-black rights position. Because the other side was that the whites owned the blacks, therefore they owned their votes. And I don't understand why history departments consistently mislead that.
Do you have a response?
Good job, my friend.
Well, I'll just say that no other nation has fought a civil war to end slavery, so.
But I'm specifically talking about him saying the Constitution was originally white supremacist. Those examples are counterexamples to what he's claiming.
Thank you. Yes, sir, welcome.
Hi, my name is Jeff Brown. I live in Georgetown. My questions are not that important. My question is, you brought up the year 2016 many times. We were in a Republican side of the aisle in 2016. What happened in 2016 specifically, Jennifer, that you spoke about, of all of the schools going towards this, when I feel like as much as this issue is not left or right, it truly is?
Sure. So I talked about the Fetzer Institute and the launch of Castle and social emotional learning. Actually started in '94. It was not in our schools until the first school that took on social emotional learning was in Illinois, the Chicago public school system and the state of Illinois in 2010. They launched a districts-wide pilot. There was 10 school districts across the nation that they piloted this, and then in 2016 they launched the States in that initiative, and that's where they infiltrated, and that was the year that they did it. Ironically, in 2016, the United Nations came out with their new global plan for education, which was the social emotional learning. You can take it for what it's worth. This is true, but they also never planned on losing the election.
I still don't understand how that could all happen in 2016 based on who our president was, but maybe the wheels were already in motion.
They had already laid the foundation.
So one other quick question. It's probably best suited for the gentleman in the orange, and I'm sorry I forgot your name.
Sure, Mike.
Mike. I can't wrap my head around the transgenderism phenomenon between hospitals, Boston Hospital, teachers, principal, like you name it. What is the fascination for the less than 1% of the population to push this agenda? What's their end game?
I think there's a lot of different things. I mean, I think it's driven by ideology, but it's also driven, as Jennifer said too, by money. And like if you looked at the Vanderbilt, I don't know if you guys saw the Vanderbilt Project Veritas videos, where she was boasting that, each surgery was going to bring in $40,000 for the university. So it's big money. I mean, Planned Parenthood is now big into it. So I know that's kind of the cliche answer that it's all about the money, but in many ways it is.
I just can't figure out for the life of me, why is it Democrats really far left wing that go for the teacher jobs only? Like, why is there no counteractive? Why is there not a mix of population in the people that are teaching our children? What's the attraction to teach our children one side?
Well, I went for it, but they kicked me out, so they fired me.
But so is that the answer? They get rid of everyone who's not in the club?
Well, they're silenced, certainly, right now. Or they're afraid they'll lose their jobs. And when you get into the teachers' colleges, it's hostile to people that don't want to align with that. But I just wanted to back up just a minute. So every Marxist revolution that we've had throughout time, the people knew that were running it and trying to create this communist state is that you have to separate the children from the parents, and that's what they're trying to do.
It's,
yeah.
but I still don't understand. We have social media for good or for bad, okay? Information is at our fingertips. There can't be that many people that are on board with silencing. And trust me, I'm on your side. I just can't wrap my head around how this club is so tight and so driven with so many people that is the majority of people who own TV stations, radio stations. They teach our kids. Why? Why is that population such a giant part of what controls our information? And not someone that's like, I can speak what I want on Facebook and I'll get kicked off. Yeah, I'm off for 24 days or whatever. But I come out and I say it again. So why is it not more people speaking out that make me feel like I'm not insane?
There are more people speaking out. The problem that we have is that the media are water carriers for the left. We've been watching it, we've been seeing it, because their hatred for one man supersedes their love of country.
And I've been saying that, but I can't believe the club is that big.
It's not. It's not. So what your silence has been compliance. So when you get up, when you don't go and vote because you believe that your vote doesn't matter, that's voter suppression. That's why question 4 isn't in the ballot booklet. That's why they want to give illegals driver's license, which automatically registers them to vote, so that you're a subject, not a citizen. Well, we fought a war to make sure that we are not subjects, and we, the people, need to stand up, reassert your rights, know your rights, and be strong. Don't allow them to control the narrative. That's why we're here. That's why we're out here. And that's why we need to vote come November.
Just for the sake of expediting this process, if I could ask the people in line asking questions to limit it to 1, and if you have more questions, just go back to the back of the line and just keep on cycling through. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Sue Heersink. I'm a grandmother of 9, but none of them are in Newburyport schools. But of course, I love Newburyport, so I care what's happening. And I teach at a school in Africa where girls are all circumcised at age 13. And we're putting that away. Those girls now have a choice if they want to go through the cut or not. And most of them are picking not going through the cut, and they're becoming doctors, lawyers, teachers, because we're educating them. Meanwhile, here in a first world country, we're instituting things much worse than just cutting someone's clitoris off or circumcising them at age 13 as a boy. We're doing much worse things. And I was thinking that all the institutions that are doing these surgeries to reassign gender, before a surgeon is allowed to do a surgery like that, their children have to be done first. And they have to have some pictures and some, their children on film saying, this was great, I'm so glad I had my penis removed. I'm glad I no longer have a womb and can never carry a child. What do you think? Would that help?
Well, let me just encourage you.
Maybe you shouldn't.
That, we just gave our citizenship award this year to 2 grandmas. One came from Woburn and one came from Salem. And the one from Salem went to Worcester every week and passed out flyers. And she was one of the main reasons 4,000 kids opted out of sex ed in Worcester, right? And the other woman in Woburn, she passed out flyers to people as they were dropping their kids off, which you guys are doing in Newburyport as well. And she, because of the work she did, the school decided to postpone the teaching of the 3 R's and reconsider the sex ed for the middle school. That was the power of one grandmother that was passing out flyers.
We're a nasty group, let's
So
face it.
so all I say is, if 2 grandmas can make a difference, right?
One
Then
could
we should
really do.
all collectively be able to make an even greater change in our towns and cities.
Hi, it doesn't matter what my name is because no one's going to listen when I say it, right? We always say my name is and nobody hears it. Thanks. Trying to stay anonymous. I should have two observations. One, earlier, Rayla, and you know I love you, she's been on my show, engaged in a shouting match with someone who was here.
You know you've got to be the big black guy in the room.
I understand that, but I think there are a lot of people who don't have a side. When something like that happens, they learn nothing. And when we're shouting someone down, we're no better than the left-wing lunatics that are shouting us down. I would prefer to let them say what they want to say, get it on the record, and let the rest of us consume it for what it is. The second thing that I want to say is this gentleman that spoke earlier, I wanted him to define white supremacy. I think it's important for our side. When someone gets up with a different view or disagrees with us, instead of us all shouting him down like the left-wing lunatics do and becoming them, let's engage with them in a much more civilized way and ask them the questions like, can you please define white supremacy? Because people use this word, don't even know what it means. They don't understand that white supremacy means it's a whole philosophy that white people are genetically superior to other races. Having a 3/5 census apportionment in the Constitution has nothing to do with genetic superiority. But if we engage with them, we could actually get someone like this gentleman who disagrees with us on something and bring him to the middle, or maybe even bring him over to our side. So I think you guys did a great job today. I don't want to take anything away from what you did. You guys are making a huge difference in the culture. I just think we could make so much more of a difference if we engage with the other side respectfully, as long as they're being respectful, instead of just shouting them down. Thank you.
Thank you. And so, thank you. I want to address just something real quick. To your point about observations about how this was ran today, I'd like to ask the members of the audience who are still here, if you have any feedback, if you have any comments, if you have any questions, or if you want to get involved in any way, our Facebook page is up here on the screen. We welcome your comments. We want to know your feedback because I have a feeling we're going to be doing stuff like this again in the future. To your point about the white supremacy, what I'm getting is there might be space for another forum for us to just have this type of back and forth, because this wasn't really meant to be a back and forth thing. We were presenting information about what's going on in the schools. It sounds like we may benefit from a forum where there is some back and forth, where we might be able to hash out some of these issues and discussions in a more informal manner. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, my name is Annie. I'm from Methuen, Massachusetts, obviously. I'm wicked nervous, but we're using the Trails program at our school, and I guess I'm here for help and suggestions. Last year, I looked up the program when I heard about it. It's social emotional learning, and I didn't really like what it stood for, and I opted my daughter out, and they didn't seem to have a problem with that at the time. So she didn't do it last year. It was on their laptops. They would watch videos, they would fill out the surveys, they would answer questions, and things like that. Now this year, she's in 7th grade, and she said, Mom, they're doing the Trails program again. I told the teacher that, my new teacher, that I don't do it. And she asked, why? And she's like, well, my mom opted me out. And she looked confused. It was her first year with the program. So she probably went and spoke with some colleagues, came back, and the next week, my daughter came to me and said, Mom, the teacher told me I had to take the survey, I had to take the paper. And I said, you did? And she's like, yeah, no, I told her I opted out. Ask my mother, I opted out. So she's like, well, there is no opt-out. You have to take the form. So she took the form, and girl after my own heart, she said, I answered the questions. I said, oh my goodness, what did you say? She goes, well, I put none of your business, none of your business, none of your business. And I gave her a high five. So in another conversation, it came up about it again, and she's like, I asked her if she watched the videos. And she's like, well, it's kind of hard not to watch the videos, Mom, because now the teacher puts it on a projector and it's on a big screen. So my child is enclosed in a classroom that she cannot get away from it. So what do I do? Our town doesn't talk about it. Nobody seems to care. They
Yeah.
think it's wonderful. It sounds
Yeah.
great. I've seen the videos. It's hard to argue with them because it's like, oh, this sounds so nice. We want to teach them to be empathetic.
Yeah, so we just updated our opt-out form to include surveys, okay? So if you text the word education to 87891, okay, or Newburyport or Danvers, okay, you will get a link to the opt-out form for the principal, the opt-out form for the teacher, and then the opt-out form for the survey, okay? So all that information is there for you. If the school comes back and says you can't opt out of a survey, call us. My cell phone number will get texted to you most likely, and if it's not, take my card. Because we have pro bono attorneys that can help you, okay? So that assistance is there. We just need you to take those first steps.
Right. Okay. All right, so that's the beginning. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Hey guys, my name's Ryan. I think a lot of people here might know me, especially some of the lovely folks in the audience up top there. I just have a couple of things I want to say, not direct questions, but just for the benefit of everyone here. Thank you guys for coming. Thank everyone here for coming. I'm a native Newburyporter, 7 generations to all my Newburyport folk. I love you, but I think I got you beat by about 100 years genealogically, but that doesn't really matter. I'm a product of the public education system here in Newburyport. For the locals who know the area, I went to the Kelly School for elementary. It's not even a school anymore. Went to the Rupert Knock over here, went to NHS, got out in the early 2000s. Nothing was this way even 10 years ago when I followed things. Newburyport High School, when I got out in the early 2000s, was the 3rd in the state in SAT scores. We worked hard. There was none of these discussions even at that time. We dealt with a lot of great things. We had very good grades and stats at the time in the state. Everything has changed now, and I understand that. I understand a lot of what's going on. I just want to quickly say the gentleman who spoke initially, I walked in, we all heard the guy speak. If I understand, that gentleman is actually employed at Governor Dummer, excuse me, Governor's, I'm an old timer around here. And that man collects probably close to a 6-figure salary over at Governor's, where the average student is probably over 20K. I have 3 family members who sat on the board of trustees at Governor's in my family. I also have 4 former mayors in Newburyport, presidents of the city council, current city clerks, and I won't get into that. But I know plenty of folks in the area, and I'm shocked that a guy like that gets paid to intimidate, insult, and scare adolescents and children. It's ridiculous, it's disgusting. I don't know how that man sleeps at night. With respect, that man is a racist, that man is a bigot, and that man is a child abuser. If those are the things he says in front of children, he should probably be under charges of some type of child abuse, and I'm shocked to hear it. But this is why we're here, guys. This is what we're up against. And the only way we can be up against it is to listen to the presenters tonight. Thank you guys for coming. I want to make another quick point. Midterm elections are in odd years in Massachusetts. That's school committee, that's city council, things like that. Many of you know me around here because I've helped a lot of candidates locally, state, federal. I've been around. I'm like the Beach Boys. Round, round, get around, I get around. Rayla knows that reference. I'm a Beach Boys fan. We have to work with our communities. There are great people like Mike King right here who I've worked with many times in the past. Samson, Rayla, and I thank you, miss. I haven't met you before, but you're great. We have to remember that these things are up to us in our local communities. There are great supports, people like Mike out there doing this work, but it is up to us. And as you said in Worcester, Mike, what you do on a local level can make a difference. They can bring in their big activists. They can bring in their people to try to call you every name in the book. You're, herophobe, herophobe, therophobe, everywhere phobe, but old MacDonald had a farm, full by O, which means fear in Greek for those Greek scholars in the room. We just have to keep up what we're doing. We have to talk to people in the community. It means knocking on a door. Hi, my name's so-and-so. I might be a candidate for this. I'm a concerned parent. This is what's going on in the schools. I want you to know. I'd like to open up a dialogue. All these things can be accomplished on a shoestring budget. I have done that, and we have to remember all of those things. I think I'll just leave it at that, but I'll conclude with one little point that at least one person on the stage is going to know, being a native Newburyporter, that a prophet is never accepted in his place of birth. And I'll go with that. Thank you, guys.
I thought this was about just asking a question. So I'm going to ask
one question. I thought this whole forum was about asking one question. So I'll be the guy that will ask one question.
Thank you.
Can a parent or grandparent go into the classroom and sit there, like when I was a kid, and watch the class be taught? Is that still available? Because when I was a kid, they could. Yes or no? That's the question. So if it's yes, and people don't like what's being taught, right? Which now I learned a lot here because I had no idea. Then show up as a grandparent or parent in the classroom and voice your opinion. You're paying taxes.
I do have a response to your comment, and I think it's a good idea. I don't have a school-age child. I have a 3-year-old little girl, and I'm scared to death of what she's going to be facing if she ever ends up in public school. I'll do everything I can to prevent that from happening. But I heard anecdotally that there was recently an open house at one of the local schools, and in advance of that local house, open house, the teachers were directed to remove all of the rainbow flags, all of the LGBTQ propaganda. I don't have any citations, but I heard that this happened anecdotally locally. So I don't even know if showing up at the schools and being like, I'm here to see what's going on, is necessarily going to be effective.
Well, see, again, anecdotally, I just heard from a friend that all the pride flags in Stoughton and in Dedham were taken out of the schools. Okay? So this stuff is happening. You guys probably saw the Supreme Court victory 9-0 of the Christian flag. Revere just had a Christian flag hoisting celebration. What was the other one? Lowell just happened, okay? So again, change is happening, and to his point of grandparents, we have grandparents that are going to schools, passing out flyers. You guys have already been doing this in Newburyport with what Lori's doing, and that's super powerful. Go get flyers from us. Go to your school. Be on a public sidewalk. You know, give those flyers to parents, like the grandmother did in Worcester. Okay, that grandmother in Worcester now has a street team of 10 people and 3 drop-off locations. Okay, so she's super organized and doing a great job in Worcester.
Thank you. Is there any more questions from people in the audience who, come on up.
Can I just make a comment? I've been reading a lot of history lately, and all I want to do is say you need to read your history. The latest book I'm reading is America in Perspective, because someone made a comment about the Constitution, and what came up about the Constitution is when they wrote it, we had the North, we had the South, and the people that wrote the Constitution thought that slavery would just fade away. Well, it didn't, because back then, we didn't have social media. So all I can say is if you're up on your history, you can see what's happening now, because history repeats itself.
Thank you. All right, one more raucous round of applause for our speakers in the forum this evening. Any last thoughts? I'd like to thank you all for coming out tonight. This was sponsored by Citizens for Responsible Education. Please find our Facebook page. We want to hear from you. I've only been involved with this group for a couple of months now. They've welcomed me like family. We have social meetings every other week or so. They're a great place for us to get together, talk about what new developments we've uncovered in the public school system, and to figure out how to organize and be effective moving forward. So thank you all for coming out tonight. As we leave, I'm going to be hooking up a local, I guess, campaign ad that has to do specifically with the books that are being promoted in the public school system. And please, you know, by all means, reach out to us, get to know us. We're all very friendly, and we're honored that you came here tonight. Thank you.